Welcome to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski. You know, we don't diagnose here, nor do we treat, but we hope to educate, inform, to empower you to be in charge of your own health and wellness. We have an incredible show today, an incredible guest. We have Dr. Paul Arciero with us today. Dr. Paul is a professor at University of Pittsburgh, and he is in research there and is working on nutrition and performance. And that's going to actually be the topic today. We're going to discuss health and performance. Welcome, Paul, to the show.
Ed, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want the audience to know a little bit about you. You're not originally from here. You're from
upstate New York.
Upstate New York.
Recently, yeah.
And you were a professor at what college before you came to Pitt?
So for 30 years, I was a professor at Skidmore College in the Health and Human Physiological Sciences Department.
So tell us what that actually is, because that's a number of terms all put together.
Yeah. You know, it's a major for students who want to pursue careers in the healthcare professions. Medical doctor, chiropractic, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, nursing, nutrition, registered dietitian. So it's anything related to the healthcare profession. So we pretty much prepared students for that career path. And then for the few that wanted to go into research, that was also available. We were a very unique school in that we were a small liberal arts school, but hyper-focused on preparing students to excel in the healthcare profession, whether it was from a clinical standpoint or from a research standpoint.
And research is important because you're actually doing studies on functionality and basically getting an understanding of what we do in our daily lives and what we don't do in our daily lives and how that impacts our health and our wellness.
Yeah, you know, for me, research is at the core of understanding how our bodies work. We can read all that we can, maybe on Google or, you know, medical published peer-reviewed scientific papers, but until you actually experience research, you don't quite fully understand the gravity of what it means in terms of influencing a person's life in a healthier way. And that's what research does. Research opens up our eyes, and with what we do in the research that I do in my lab, we call them human randomized clinical trials. So we actually have people undergo these research experiences over time. So we take them at baseline, and then we follow them over a certain period of time, intervening with either a nutrition, an exercise, or a healthier lifestyle intervention.
So medicine today seems to be very reactive. We wait for a disease process to occur, and then we have some form of treatment or surgery. I've, for 30 years, have jokingly called it Frankenstein medicine, which I coined years ago, only because that's how they made Frankenstein. They cut him up, they sewed him back together, or they suppressed him, and that's how Frankenstein came to be. And I'm not saying that's not necessary. You know, you have a heart attack, you have a car accident, you fall and break your leg, you need that form of medicine. But traditionally, medicine ignores the proactive form, and this is exactly what you're studying.
Yeah, what we're really talking about, and you're right, there are some absolute necessities to the current way we deliver our healthcare system. It's a treatment-based system, meaning as someone comes in with an acute illness, an injury, some type of trauma, or a disease condition, we treat it. And so what we do in the research that I do, it's lifestyle medicine. It's precision lifestyle medicine, and it's preventative. And I mean, just think about that term versus treatment. And so, yeah, what we try to do is intervene in people's lives before those traumatic disease states occur.
So we look at disease, Dr. Paul, and we really see it as dis-ease. It's body out of homeostasis, out of balance.
Yeah.
How do we get to that point?
Oh gosh, there's a multitude of reasons why, but that disease state is primarily driven and caused by lifestyle choices. We know that our genes play a role. There's no denying that. We have a susceptibility to health or to disease based upon what's ingrained within our DNA. That's our genes. But that's a small little amount of the true risk that we experience with disease. So much of what we know about all different types of diseases, and if I may just real quickly list the 5 big ones, Diabetes, number one, primarily type 2 diabetes. Heart disease, number two. Inflammatory conditions, things that are related to cancer and other inflammatory states. Alzheimer's disease and related dementias that are Parkinson's disease. And then fifth would be musculoskeletal things. Things like lower back pain, right? I mean, it's the most commonly reported ailment right now. So those are the 5 big disease states. And believe it or not, lifestyle can intervene and prevent the vast majority of those.
So I always say that disease is a state of imbalance, and a lack of nutrition, lack of the body flowing properly, electrons moving properly, all of these things combined. And a lot of people say, well, it's caused by genetics. And I think very few diseases are actually genetic. And those are going to show up at the time of birth, not develop years later. What I see those development of diseases that they're blaming on genetics is really epigenetics. Mm-hmm. Is that a term you could explain for our audience?
Yeah, so our genes are what we're born with. And as I said, we inherit certain things. And as you rightly described, oftentimes some of those genetic inborn diseases are things that occur quite quickly after birth, or at least in the developmental years we can see these things happening. But epigenetics are those things that are influencing the genes from the outside.
So this lock and key thing, you might have the disposition with that gene, but if you don't insert the key, turn the lock, it's not going to express itself.
That's right. You can lose the key. Yeah. So, and that's what prevention we try to do with lifestyle interventions. We try to make that key not accessible to that particular disease to turn it on. So it's like us when we lose our keys to everything, cars and house and things like that. And that's essentially what we're trying to do is interject and hack that normal process. So for example, we know that there are certain ethnicities and certain groups of people, certain cultures that are predisposed to certain of those 5 diseases, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, cancers, inflammatory conditions. But what we can do is intervene through lifestyle and prevent that lock and key from happening, to turn that process on and make them more susceptible to that disease state.
So what is our number one mistake?
Our number one mistake? Oh gosh, let's see. To me, it always comes down to nutrition. I think we are just absolutely inundated with low, poor quality nutrition.
Processed foods?
Yeah, we're talking about what we call UPFs, ultra processed foods. That's the term that's used in the science world. So yeah, right now we are ultra processing the way in which we, I hate to use the word even associated with that, nourish human bodies.
Yeah, that's
human bodies are being
isn't it?
Human bodies are being nourished at a very low quality of nourishment. So, yeah, that would be my number one. And then the list goes on from there. Poor sleep habits.
And people don't realize how important that is. You only heal when you sleep.
We pride ourselves, at least here in kind of North America, on doing more with less time. Let's just burn the candle at both ends and get as much done as we can. It's almost like a rite of passage. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's sending the wrong message, that when we're expecting people to sleep less and do more, that's completely diametrically opposing to the survival of an organism. Anytime you tell an organism, we want you to produce more on less recovery and rest, well, that's a recipe for the extinction of that organism. So we need to do an overhaul of how we administer lifestyle. And you mentioned the term disequilibrium. We're not in equilibrium. Homeostasis is what our body's always trying to achieve, and we're just bombarded with things in social media, ultra-processed foods, staying up late at night, working, on a phone or something.
And it's a battle, because when that happens, you become in a state of inflammatory response. And where there's inflammation, there's disease. Where there's disease, there's inflammation. So to control that becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
And if you're undernourished or malnourished to begin with, where are you getting all the vitamins and the minerals and the proteins to make the amino acids that your body needs? You're not getting them.
You're not.
And then you set yourself up for that disease process. So eating processed foods, you know, that's what we do. We go to the grocery store, and even if the old saying, what's that saying, if you shop the outer aisles of the grocery store, I don't know if that's so much true anymore, because all that food out there is sprayed with all these chemicals and preservatives and harvested before they're matured so they can transport them, and then glycosides are placed on them. I mean, all of these things that are on that food that we're eating, our body has to handle it somehow.
Yeah. Are you asking me to provide an answer? I don't know if I have it, but you're exactly right. I think you have to be a super sleuth, you know, in terms of understanding and knowing what you need to nourish your body with. But there are some pretty simple recommendations that I have created and I think are really useful, and maybe we can talk about those in detail. But I think going to the grocery store or a farmer's market or a community supported agriculture farm that might be available to provide some of those foods that are from the earth and are the least processed. And they can be both plant and animal. I think sometimes we categorize health as only plant-based, and that's not entirely true. While plants are healthy, fruits and vegetables and herbs and things like that, there are some animal sources that are of the most highest quality. So you really answered it. It's really a matter of making sure that quality stays at the top of our prioritization of how we nourish ourselves, and the quantity is much less important.
So, you know, we talk about amino acids. That's really the building blocks.
Yeah,
it isn't so much protein, it's building blocks.
Yeah.
And if you're a vegetarian, and I will admit my diet is mostly vegetarian, I eat animal products, but not in great abundance.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, animals, if they're being hunted, they have the ability to run or defend themselves. Plants don't. So plants naturally make things to protect themselves from being eaten.
That's right.
They can make us sick, like lectins, for example.
Sure.
And that if you have a sensitivity to these lectins, that creates maybe a bigger problem for you. Plants aren't complete proteins. The only plant that I'm aware of, maybe you know you're aware of anything else, is the hemp plant. It's the only complete plant that's complete protein, has the complete amino acids. So if you're eating all these vegetables and you're not getting enough of the complete proteins, you're starving yourself. Is that a good way to look at it?
It is, yeah. So plant-based, I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. I advocate and promote that as much as possible. You want to definitely have a sufficient and adequate amount of healthy plants coming in. The issue with plants is, as you said, they don't contain the full complex of amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, and more specifically what we call the essential amino acids. And so
that's a word that I think you need to explain for us.
Yeah. So when it comes to protein, and protein, by the way, is derived from the Greek word proteos, which means primary vital. So of all of the three major macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and protein is the top priority. And when it comes to plants, unfortunately, plants don't have that full complex of both the essential and non-essential. What that simply means is a non-essential amino acid is something that is not essential for us to eat, meaning our body can produce it.
By taking some amino acids and combining them.
It takes it from existing tissues on the body, or it can manufacture it because the threshold of the manufacturing of it inside the body is relatively low. So we can make almost a little bit more than half of these amino acids that our body requires for protein. Those are non-essential, but those other essential amino acids, they're essential because we have to consume them. It's essential that we eat them. In fact, I just published a position stand in the International Society of Sport Nutrition, and it talks specifically on the importance of essential amino acids as we age and as we expose ourselves to lifestyle conditions that are combating our health. Longevity. We can talk about longevity. That's an area of research of interest of mine.
Well, I have this good sensation and feeling that we can't do everything in one time. So you'll be back on our show when your time permits. And of course, you're also doing my radio show every Saturday morning that I do. That you've been on that before, and you're coming back.
Excellent. Yes.
And so I think you have to break that up in segments because there's just so much information that's so vital, and you just can't throw it out in an hour or 30 minutes. You know, it's going to be
that wouldn't be
a ladder builder here.
Good.
And it's so important because that word essential means if you're not taking it in, you just don't have them.
You don't have them. So that's the struggle with people that adopt a vegetarian, a vegan, a plant-based eating regimen that don't have the full understanding of what they need to do. And so we call it complementarity. So when you complement plant foods, you're taking certain foods that are missing some of the amino acids and complementing them with other foods. A perfect example of this is rice and beans, nuts and grains. So you have to learn how to complement these two different sources of plant-based foods so that you bring together at one eating occasion the full complementarity of the essential amino acids. It used to be thinking that, oh, as long as you got it over the course of a 24-hour time period, and now the research is showing absolutely not. If you don't consume those essential amino acids eating a plant-based diet at the same meal, you will be shortchanging your body's ability to rebuild, repair, and rejuvenate tissues and cells and organs. So it has to be done at that same time.
And that's being in harmony when you do that.
That's harmony.
Yeah.
That's equilibrium. That's homeostasis.
Yeah. So one of the things I notice, and I see this, it's interesting. I didn't see it that often before, but when I look in a patient's mouth and I see what we call scalloped tongue, or there's medical terms for it, we don't need to get there, but it's a swollen tongue, and I start to see the imprint of the teeth on the sides of the tongue. Cool. Usually I would say that's some form of anemia, usually B12, and it was seen infrequently, but seen. Interesting enough, since the COVID and the COVID vaccines, I see it quite frequently. And I don't know if the virus itself, Robin, your ability to process vitamin B12, I don't know if it's the vaccine doing that. I mean, it was a surge that I saw immediately when those vaccines started to happen. Plant really don't have vitamin B12.
That's right.
Other
than maybe some plankton in the ocean.
Yeah,
not much.
Well, we're not eating that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's important that if somebody is vegan or vegetarian, and explain the difference between the two.
Yeah. So vegan is only consuming plant-derived sources of nourishment. Vegetarian is incorporating some form of animal in the form of dairy, eggs, things like that, maybe a little bit of fish, and there's different names. There's pesco-vegetarian if you eat a little bit of fish. There's polo-vegetarian if you eat a little bit of chicken. There's octo-vegetarian if you eat, ovo-vegetarian if you eat some eggs. Lacto if you eat some dairy. So there's many different variations.
We've got names for everything these days.
There's pescatarian and fruitarian. The bottom line is that a vegan avoids all forms of animal-based.
And so they set themselves up to be deficient for vitamin
They're deficient.
B12.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So they need a supplement.
And every cell in your body needs vitamin B12.
Yeah, vitamin B12.
Every organ, your thyroid doesn't operate if it doesn't have vitamin B12.
Yeah, there's a real risk. And again, I'm a professed vegan at one point in my life, and I was never more unhealthy, believe it or not. Now, again, I wasn't doing it as well as I could. I need better education. So are there certain groups that could perhaps survive on a pure vegan diet? I think so, but they would have to do some level of supplementation in order to get all those things.
And then our body doesn't handle B vitamins very well. And so those need to be taken in certain forms sublingually under the tongue, and there's, especially with B12, there's methylcobalamin and cyanocobalamin. Difference between those two?
Yeah, well, it's the chemical structure, right? So they're kind of isoforms, we call them. They're kind of one and the same, but there are specific structural differences between cyanocobalamin and methylcobalamin.
So cyanocobalamin comes from cyanide,
That's right.
but it's not toxic to you, but badly absorbed. It's a cheaper form. So
Exactly.
when I look at a product and I see cyanocobalamin, I say that belongs back on the shelf or in the trash.
Yes, that's right. So it's synthesized.
It's synthesized.
It's a manufactured form of the cobalamin, whereas methyl is more of a naturally occurring.
And we methylate.
And we methylate.
What
yeah.
is methylation?
Well, I don't know if we should go into that.
We can go lightly. It's real deep because every process doesn't function unless we methylate. But you can give an idea what methylation is.
Yeah. So it's a chemical process in which takes place inside the body with various chemical reactions. And when you methylate something, again, it all comes down to the structure of the substance, in this case, whatever we're talking about in the B vitamin form, that's allowing for it to be serving a particular function inside the body. I don't know if I want to go much deeper than that.
So, for example, all vitamin B complexes have folic acid in there.
Mm-hmm.
And all folic acid is synthesized. It's all man-made. There's not a natural form of folic acid. And you can have something called an MTHFR gene defect.
That's right.
Which cannot process that folic acid. And what do you do about it? Well, if you take methylfolate, which is folic acid that has this methyl group attached to it.
Again, the structure.
Yeah. Then you're able to do that. And a lot of people don't know about it, but 40% of the people in this country have this gene. Do you need a test for it? Yeah, maybe. But all you need to do is buy methylfolate, and you circumvent the issue.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't hurt you, and it's better. You're actually absorbing this folic acid because it has this methyl group on it.
You know, as you're describing this, I'm quickly reminded of, I brought up the term ultra-processed foods. Mm-hmm. And people just immediately assume that any food that is in a package or has been somehow engineered is not healthy for us. And that's not necessarily true. And this is a good example, for example, with the methylfolate. That has to be something that you purchase. And comes in a particular form. I don't know if you buy it in powder form, capsule form, but
I buy it in a liposomal liquid form.
Liposomal, so it comes
and
in a liquid form,
sublingual.
which is, yep. So, the nanoparticleization of certain delivery systems now is becoming much more popular in a liquid-based medium. The point here is that ultra-processed food is different from nutritionally engineered foods, or supplements in this case. And so that's a really important distinction, and I think people should be made aware of that don't just assume that if something does come in somewhat of a package or in a powder, that it is immediately an ultra-processed food. In some cases, those nutritionally engineered foods are doing exactly what you're describing, and they are pulling together the best of what we have available in nature into a powder, into a bar, into some other food form, vitamin, mineral complex. And so that's a really important distinction. So people just need a little bit better education. And sometimes those nutritionally engineered foods are more cost effective than the whole food source that has been adulterated, has been laden with chemicals to help it preserve.
Is eating organic important?
I mean, organic can be very beneficial and very healthy, but not in every case. For example, some organic foods have undergone massive delivery and transportation time delay. And so sometimes people just assume, again, here's another kind of default that, oh, it's organic, it's good. But if it's been transferred over a long period of harsh travel or time, then it's reduced the nutrient density, because once you clip or pick or begin to harvest a plant-based food, its nutritional quality plummets.
And then sometimes they're picking those before they're even ready to be picked.
And sometimes you're picking them early.
So that they can transport them without spoiling
right.
the product. And so you're not getting the full nutrition when they're, and then
That's right.
My understanding on some of these fruits and vegetables, they're spraying with things like Roundup that causing the
Glyphosates, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real issue.
I mean, after they're picked, they're spraying them in transport so that they then kind of mature and get the color and the appearance that we need. Because if food doesn't look good, you don't want to eat it.
That's right.
And you know, I don't know a lot about that, but that's my understanding that happens.
Well, we accelerate, this is the irony, we accelerate the growth period of produce, plants and fruits and vegetables. So we accelerate that. We want to get them to market as quickly as possible. So we provide a lot of growth accelerators in that process. Then, once it's harvested, we perform certain things that extend the shelf life of those fruits and vegetables. So think about that. Whereas the reverse should be true. What we should be doing is allowing the natural time course of a fruit or vegetable that takes time. It's like all of us as humans. We want to have longevity. Well, plants and vegetables want to do the same thing. They want to grow at their pace of nature. And so they don't want to be accelerated. And then when they perish, or when it's harvested, the shelf life is very short. And so we want to make sure that we're consuming those things within a very short window of time. And we're doing the direct opposite. We're accelerating the growth, making the lifespan very, very short, and then extending the lifespan after when we consume those things. That's why when you buy an apple or a tomato or some other vegetable that has undergone some of those, I would call them very poor agricultural practices of growth factors and things, that's why they can stay for a much longer period of time. So that would be one other indication, you know, for a fruit and vegetable, just to see its natural time course.
Yeah, so it's critical what we put in our mouth and our digestive tract for the nutrients that we need, and it's just as critical what we don't put in.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And that's a very difficult battle that we have, you know, in our busy lives. And, you know, we used to go out and hunt and grow and so forth. Now we just shop, you know, and you really have to be a discerning shopper today, or otherwise you're going to get yourself in trouble.
You absolutely do, yeah. Yeah, so it comes down to I talk about this in my book, slow and dirty. We gotta harvest and help the growth cycle of plants and animals over a longer period of time, and go back to the earth.
Because we're not going to win the battle of dying or not dying, but we want to be healthy and well, have longevity, not be bedridden, sick, and hooked up to tubes as we age.
What you're really describing is lifespan versus health span. And so right now in our society, we're doing a wonderful job of keeping people alive for a very long time. We're extending lifespan, not health span.
We want to be healthy and happy. Dr. Paul, we're at our first break. We're here with Dr. Paul Arciero, and we're discussing your health and your wellness and how you can be in charge. You know, you can listen to me live every Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on AM 1250 The Answer. We'll be back.
You earned it.
Welcome back to Health and Wellness with Dr. Ed, or the Dr. Ed Show, as we like to say. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're here with Dr. Paul Arciero, who is a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, which is, you know, worldwide known school. Everybody knows University of Pittsburgh. In fact, my family's school. I didn't go there, but my rest of my family did. You have a research background, doctor. And without research, we know nothing. That's basically, it's all guesswork. And you're taking the guesswork out of health and wellness. And you're really, as a practitioner, we really get our information from you. you're providing all this to us because you're doing the studies, and we don't do that. Most practitioners don't. They just write a script or do a treatment and procedure and so forth. So you're critical for our health and wellness. And before we took our first break, we were talking about inflammation there. Well, not all inflammation is bad, is it?
It's not. And by the way, I think we work very synergistically. Oftentimes, you're on the front line.
Yeah.
And so you inform the research. So I think that's really important. But yeah, research has no emotion. And when it comes to, it just is the data, which is what I like about it. You know, we produce the data. And one of the areas of data that I'm interested in collecting is inflammation. And what we have learned over the study of human subjects as study participants in research is that a little bit of inflammation is good. Our bodies need it because it's allowing the anti-inflammatory system to stay active. I mean, imagine, Dr. Ed, if we had no inflammation. Well, then at the onset of an insult, of an injury, of a scar, a disease state, if you haven't been practicing, I'm talking about now the body, the immune system, hadn't been practicing how to defend against that, well then it might not do a very good job. So you always need a little bit of low-level inflammation because that's that kicks up the anti-inflammatory immune system pathways to stay active. So you need that.
Without that little bit of inflammation, you're not going to regenerate.
That's right. Yeah, you're not going to regenerate. You're not going to be prepared. You're not going to have the defense army ready. And so it's like anything else that we know. We have to prepare for athletics, sports. We have to prepare intellectually when we go into a study or an exam, rather. And we have to be on the ready. That's our body.
Yeah, you know, when I was done with school, I thought I'd never have to learn anything ever again. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
So the problem is what when this inflammation process gets out of control?
Yeah, when it runs amok, when it becomes havoc and chaos, and that happens, unfortunately, more and more common, right? And the reason is because we are constantly exposing ourselves to toxins and pollutants. I mean, just think about it. I hate to admit it, but even in this room right now, we are bombarded by air pollutants.
Well, the paint off gases, these chairs off gas, our clothes off gas.
What we use for shampoo today and lotions. I shaved and put on some lotion. Those have some chemicals in there that are probably not favorable. So yeah, we are constantly breathing in, applying, consuming with the foods that we eat and drink, unfortunately, massive amounts of toxins. And a good example, not a good example, but an example of this is for the first time last year, it was shown that humans are actually absorbing and breathing in microplastics. These are little tiny plastic particles in the food and air that we're breathing and eating. And we're finding it in our lung tissue.
How about all those masks?
Yeah.
That are
Think about the
generating
fibers.
formaldehyde, and some had graphene in them, and all those fibers. And you know, you think you're wearing a mask
for
to prevent
protection.
This virus stuff, and the N95, which is the gold standard mask, and you know, I wear that in my practice. I take it off as often as I can. That will not prevent asbestos from entering fibers.
No, microparticles have direct entry still.
And this asbestos is 10 times the size of COVID virus.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you're a logical thinker, then you should come to the realization that if it's not preventing asbestos from getting in, it sure as heck is not preventing the virus from getting in.
Yeah, our exposure to those toxins is unfortunate. So I study this. So what I do in my research is I actually dive down deep into the furthest reaches of the body, and I look at what is happening to toxin pathways and the mobilization of toxins. So I study it in the blood, and I study it in the feces. That's another area that we study it.
So it becomes almost impossible to prevent those from coming in.
Almost impossible.
So
the
how
body
do we control it?
Yeah, so the way we control it, that's a great question. We talked a little bit earlier about certain foods that we can eat, like, for example, plants. So animals can defend themselves for the most part. depending upon the animal, the species of animal. But plants can do that too. Now, in some ways, they do it with poisons. They can do it with other substances. You mentioned lectins that some people are very reactive to. Those are substances found in legumes, beans, and certain other vegetables. But plants can also increase the defense system around these toxic organisms through the formation of things that are called adaptogens and antioxidants. And so what we can do from a nutrition standpoint to defend against this bombardment, literally bombardment of pollutants and toxins that we encounter every day at a very high level, is to consume more of these adaptogens and antioxidants.
So that word adaptogen is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because really in there is the word what we would understand as adapt.
Adapt, yeah.
So does that mean that, like if I take ashwagandha, which is an adaptogen, it's going to do one thing for you and something different for me?
Yeah, it absolutely will, depending upon your chemical makeup, your DNA, your genetic makeup. And the same way it will for the plants. And so those plants have created those adaptogens like ashwagandha, eleutherol, schizandra. I mean, the list goes on, bagopa, maneri. So we have all these different types of adaptogens, and what they really are, they're plants that have developed these defense systems in harsh environments or heavy prey environments. So sometimes they're found in the desert, sometimes they're found at high mountain altitude. So it really varies where these adaptogens come from, but the unique aspect is that they have formed these substances in the plants themselves, and when we consume them, we have the same capacity to defend against these toxins. And what ashwagandha or eleutherol or schizandra might do for you might be a little bit different for me.
And that's critical. Should you experiment a bit by starting with small doses and see what your reaction is? Is that how you start taking these adaptogens?
Yeah, so that's really what we're talking about is precision nutrition. And when it comes to how to apply these different nutrients and substances, sometimes it's self-experimentation, sometimes it can be targeted. We know now through research, beginning the topic here with research, we know that with research we can determine certain targets of these adaptogens for certain pathways, inflammatory pathways in the body, for certain immune pathways inside the body, for certain activation or deactivation pathways in the body. And what I'm talking about is we want certain times in our body for certain metabolic or biochemical pathways to be expressed. A good example of this is after you've exercised, you want the pathway of protein synthesis to be activated. You want your body to start to repair and rebuild new muscle tissue after you've exercised. So that's an activation pathway. In other cases, we want a deactivation pathway to occur, where we want that pathway to be suppressed or blunted or not as active. And that is constantly happening inside the body all the time. So these adaptogens will target some of those upregulated or downregulated pathways.
So maybe some people can relate to it because a lot of people don't understand the importance of supplementation of herbs, spices even.
Yes, turmeric.
Like turmeric and its
Ginger.
extract.
Yeah.
Ginger's so critical.
Yeah.
The extract of curcumin from turmeric. Everybody got two ways of pronouncing something these days.
Yeah.
But people seem to understand ibuprofen and Tylenol.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, they do a lot of damage, and I'm bringing this up at this point because it's so appropriate because people understand that. I'll just take 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, or I'll take Tylenol. Those are two different pathways. The body assimilates those two things.
Yeah.
Short term, I think they're probably great. Long term, they damage kidneys and liver. How important are kidneys and liver? And that's where I wanted to go with that.
Oh boy. So when I teach my nutritional biochemistry classes to the students, I refer to the liver as mother hen. So mother hen is always looking out for its baby chicks and always serving the welfare of its offspring. That's the same way our liver works inside of our body. Our liver is always triaging and always prioritizing what is happening in the rest of the body. And so it's detoxifying all of these harmful substances that are coming in. It's managing our blood glucose at the highest level. So the liver's constantly paying attention to those primary metabolic pathways that are in the greatest need. And oftentimes it's our blood glucose level, our blood circulating fat level. It can be toxins that are circulating. So the liver plays that critical role in metabolism. It helps regulate our metabolism at the highest level.
I think we need really to explain what metabolism is, because that's a big word that I don't think anybody really understands.
Sure.
But every drug, every piece of protein, every water you drink, I don't care what it is, has to get into that liver, and that liver has to utilize it some way.
Yeah.
Has to process it.
That's right.
If you have liver disease, ain't happening.
No, it's not. And so, some of the two big hits to the liver right now are non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? So this is an issue where the liver is spending some time doing some of these other metabolic tasks, and unfortunately, it's storing some excess fat. And so there's more and more examples of people that are otherwise healthy that have excessive deposits of fat inside the liver. We call it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
And it used to be just cirrhosis, or liver disease was alcoholic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're encountering, so what are
drinkers.
Exactly, drinkers, alcoholic drinkers. So what are the causes of that? Well, it's our dietary intake. It's from an excessive intake from ultra-processed foods, simple sugars, and unhealthy fats.
Which is all processed food.
It's processed food.
So there's a huge connection between liver function and thyroid function. Mm-hmm. So you metabolize 80% of your thyroid hormone. Let's say you have the healthiest thyroid in the world, and it's producing the right amount of hormone.
Yeah.
Just for example, we produce basically in a whole year just a teaspoon of thyroid. That's how powerful that hormone is.
Yes.
80% of it's processed in your liver. Mm-hmm. And you go to a lot of these physicians, and they don't even look at your liver, and they just throw some medication your way.
Yeah.
When you're having issues with your thyroid.
Synthroid. Yep.
Synthroid, or levothyroxine is the generic name,
yep.
Or even Armour thyroid, which is natural form, pig form. Any case, that has to be processed in the liver like everything else. If you can't process it, it's really not doing anything for you. You're
That's
basically overwhelming the system. So that liver, as the major filter and the major metabolizer in your body, needs to be functioning properly.
It absolutely does.
So what is metabolism?
Yeah, metabolism is the rate at which our cells convert chemical energy into mechanical energy.
Why is that important?
Yeah. Why is that important? Well, because it allows us to do what we're doing right now: speak, think, talk, sit. Regulate our body temperature, regulate our hormonal, regulate our heartbeat. So our metabolism is our heartbeat. Metabolism is our ability to breathe in and breathe out. So every cell requires metabolism. So metabolism is the root, base level of functioning of the human body.
So if
That's metabolism.
If we're not supplying the proper nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, whatever, that goes
that's
into
dysfunction.
stress.
Yeah, it's dysfunction metabolism. And the simplest analogy, Dr. Ed, is thinking of a car as your body's metabolism. If you feed your gas tank to run your car with very low-grade gasoline and oil, it's going to function very, very poorly. And it's the same way in our body, because every cell in our body metabolizes. Every cell in our body uses energy from foods that we pull into our body, we nourish ourselves with. So it's directly related. The health and function of your metabolism is directly related to the quality of the nutrients that you're consuming.
Okay, so I've just been diagnosed with NASH. Can I do anything about it?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can immediately reduce your intake of ultra-processed foods, as we've been talking about.
Which sugar is a big culprit.
Sugar is a huge culprit, yeah, and it's not just sugar. We don't know the full extent of some of these artificial synthesized replacement sugars. Alternatives, we call them, sugar alternatives. So some of the sugar alcohols are somewhat disruptive to a lot of people's gastrointestinal tract. So one of the other areas that I study is something called the microbiome. It's the living trillions of microorganisms that are in our gut. So I study that.
We are bacteria, viruses, and
we're
fungi.
full of viruses and bacteria, yes, and all other types of things, fungus, and we have a lot of that growing inside of our gut, and some of it is really good.
They got to be controlled, though.
Got to be controlled.
One can't be the master.
So one of the recent studies that I conducted was I took a group of 40 men and women and monitored and measured their gut microbiome. So it was pretty invasive. We had to collect stool samples and analyze those in the lab. But what
That's
it told
a fun job.
Yeah, I didn't do it. My research team did it. But this is really important, the gut microbiome, Dr. Ed, because we know that we can remodel our gut microbiome in a very healthy way. So this is important for the world to know, because we can change the health of our immune system and our metabolism by interacting with our gut. And the most easy way to interact with our gut is through the quality of the nutrients that we're bringing in. We can remodel the functioning of our gut. And that is so important. That message alone is vital.
What people have to understand is the gut talks to the brain
Second
talks to
brain.
the gut,
Yeah.
the gut talks to the thyroid,
Right.
And if you disrupt any of that, none of that functions properly.
Direct lines of communication.
Yeah. So what can I do to clean up my liver if I don't have scarring? If you have scarring on the liver, you're pretty much
A
done.
little bit harder if you have scarring. Yes.
Yeah.
So what you can do is, there's things like milk thistle. There's other homeopathic remedies. But sure, the kind of the lowest hanging fruit is to minimize your intake of processed food, ultra processed food.
What about like keto diet and
Yeah.
and intermittent fasting?
Okay, so I know a little bit about both of those, having studied those. So the ketogenic diet works for some people and not for others, but there is some utility, effectiveness of it in certain groups. I think for acute weight loss for certain people, it can be very effective. I know that's contrary to what people think. Eat a high-fat diet to lose weight? Absolutely, because you need to eat fat to lose fat. If you don't eat any fat, you're going to have a really tough time losing fat. So the ketogenic diet works by feeding the body the nutrient that it will target as its primary energy source for metabolism. So the ketogenic diet for weight loss is very effective. We know that for epilepsy it's been proven very effective as well. But it's not for everybody, and certainly for certain people that want to engage in a very active lifestyle, the ketogenic diet might not necessarily be ideal, because we need some low level of healthy carbohydrates coming in too.
And then again, that's a short term.
It can
That's
be
not good for long term.
Exactly, yes. It's much more effective short term than it is long term. But let me move on to the intermittent nutritional fasting, and I write about this extensively in my book.
And we're about to talk about that.
So intermittent fasting is an umbrella term that's used. What we're really talking about is caloric restriction. And caloric restriction would be something as simple as me telling you, Ed, I want you to reduce your intake by 25%. And that's called continuous caloric restriction. Now, you'd be a miserable person. You might have, symptoms of hangriness, where you're very angry and hungry at the same time, because most people don't want to be told to eat less, especially if you want to also engage in a healthy, active lifestyle. So again, two of the most diametrically opposing forces in an organism to extend its lifespan and to remain active as a species is telling it to eat less and move more. That would be the worst thing you could possibly do. So caloric restriction doesn't work for a lot of people who especially want to live an active lifestyle. So what they have done now is created these other forms of caloric restriction called intermittent fasting. We have something called alternate day fasting, where you eat your normal intake one day, or actually even a little bit more, and then the next day you eat a little bit less. We have 24-hour intermittent fasting, where one day a week you would eat nothing but water for 24 hours. We have something called the 5-2 method, which is very, very popular. People would eat normal for 5 days and then reduce their intake down to about 500 calories on 2 days. It's called the 5-2 method. It was made popular by that.
500 calories is not much.
It's not much. Then there is the method of time-restricted eating. People
Which I
don't
think
eat.
is gaining popularity
Oh, it's
right
very
now.
popular. People don't eat for 16 hours or 18 hours and then eat for either 6 or 4 window of time. But here's the catch. With all of those, caloric restriction and the intermittent fasting, they pay very little attention to the quality of the nutrients you're consuming either on the feeding days or on the fasting days. And that's the missed target. I call it the bullseye is completely missed. You know, when you think of throwing darts at a bullseye, they're not even hitting the dart target, not to mention the bullseye. So what we do in our lab is we do a form of intermittent nutritional fasting. What that means is that you pay the highest priority and attention to the quality of nutrients that you're consuming on both the fasting and the feeding days. And that's the difference.
So the liver is probably the only organ that we're aware of that can rejuvenate. If we do this modified keto intermittent fasting thing, can that help at a certain period of time to rejuvenate our liver?
Yeah, I think there is some evidence to show that it can. There's processes called, when we caloric restrict or especially intermittent fast, called autophagy. And autophagy is the removal of dead or old, unwanted cells in the body. And that's a very healthy process. It would be the same thing that we would do in our house. We would take a vacuum out every couple of days, and we would vacuum and clean up all the dead debris that's in the house, or clean the dishes off the counter. That's autophagy, and that's very important. But actually even more helpful with intermittent nutritional fasting, because you incorporate adaptogens and antioxidants into the intermittent fasting days, is something called mitophagy. And that is the removal of dead, unwanted mitochondria. You know, we just assume that mitochondria, by the way, are the powerhouses of the cell. And so people think that mitochondrial biogenesis is really good for us. It is, but mitochondrial biogenesis, that's a fancy name for the reforming of new mitochondria in the body. That can only occur when you get rid of the old mitochondria. You can't just turn on mitochondrial biogenesis out of the blue. You have to first remove the old, unwanted mitochondria.
You know, if your mitochondria are not working, you're not breathing air.
That's right.
So, you know, we need like a 5-hour show here,
Excellent.
Dr. Paul. I want to bring up your book. Now, I have not read your book.
There's still time.
Can't wait to. It's called The Prize Life, and it's protein pacing for optimal health and performance. This is basically what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
So let me hold the book up if we can get a nice picture of it. And how do we get this book, first of all?
Yeah, Amazon is the best way. It's how I'm selling it. Barnes & Noble as well.
Okay.
Online. And you can visit my website, paularciero.com.
Yeah. I think it's critical for everybody to do that. So tell us what we're going to get out of this book. Don't give too much away.
I won't, but
you know.
Thank you for that. It's a roadmap. It's a how-to. You know, so many people, a certain number of the segment of the population know what they need to do. They just don't know how to do it. They need to be told how to do it. Others have no idea how to do it. This book meets both of that. This is for the person who knows what they need to do but doesn't know how to do it. It's also for the person that just doesn't know what to do or how to do it. And that's what the book was written for.
So like you can go to Dr. Google and research all this stuff, and you go on YouTube and look at all those things, and there's some good information, not so good information.
Yeah.
And you've got to be very discerning on what you're hearing and what you're watching, and the motivations of some of those things, because some of it is all designed just to sell you something that may be good or not good for you, who knows. You need something like this. You need, this is really authority from research, and how now to apply that to your everyday living. The question is, do I need to do this as a 20-year-old, as an 18-year-old, as a 30-year-old, as a 60-year-old? What's the best time to apply this? Well,
your experience, you know what you're doing, and thank you, because this is entirely 100% research-based. And it is for anyone. I've written it to even accommodate young, growing adolescents up to the oldest old.
Isn't that the best time to learn this lifestyle?
It sure is, yes. That's, you know, in many ways, I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Ed. You know, some of our greatest life lessons can be learned from our very youngest. And in fact, when we can start to reach them at an earlier age with healthy nutrition, and lifestyle, I believe they will be the greatest influencers on their parents. As reverse, because I don't think right now, in some cases, us as parents are doing as effective and as good a job as we could be doing in helping nurture and nourish our young boys and girls. And so I think if we can get in earlier for them, they're going to be the greatest influence.
Let me hold this up again. Can we get that on camera there? Okay, great. Dr. Paul, we're at the last 2 minutes of the show. This was a quick show. Please tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and how they can get a hold of the book.
Yeah, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is through my website, paularciero.com.
Spell Arciero for
Yeah,
us.
it's Paul, and then the last name is spelled Arciero.com.
And then the book is available.
The book is available on Amazon. They can just search The Prize Life. And then I also have a free app that's right now just on iOS, but soon to be on Android. And then if you're interested, you can look me up on Google Scholar and at the University of Pittsburgh.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming
My
on.
pleasure.
I hope you're coming back soon.
I hope so too.
You know, you can listen to Dr. Paul on the Dr. Ed Show, and it's actually on rumble.com. You go to rumble.com, search Dr. Ed Show. Of course, subscribe and share, because the knowledge you gain from there are a lot of people that need to know that as well. And you can listen to me live every Saturday morning, 12:50 a.m. at 9 a.m. in the morning. In fact, Dr. Paul is going to be on in the very near future. I don't want to date the show here because I don't know when this is going to air, but he's going to be on. Remember, a healthy pet, and a lot of the stuff you can apply to your pet as well. Healthy pet is a happy pet. When you're healthy, you're happy as well. God bless. We'll talk to you next time.